I mean, it's obvious that, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we have to change direction. Last statement on the debt. If, given the current trajectory, we are 5 years away from where Greece was a year ago when everything started going under. That's how serious this is. I mean, this is extraordinarily serious. We must get control of this. So how do we do it? Well, let me talk about first, very quickly, what we have to do, and then let me talk secondly about the process it's going to take. Because we have to change the process as well as what we're doing. The two are intertwined. What I'm convinced we have to do is we have to start downsizing the federal government as we free up the engine of free enterprise. See, we can soup up the engine too. We can turn up the injector pump on this diesel. And you do that the way Australia did it, rolling back on unnecessary regulations, for instance, creating a stable economic picture where people in business have confidence. There's a lot we can do to help ramp up the engine. I mean, really, you're getting out of the way of the lion of free enterprise. But we have to start shrinking the size of the federal government. We have to start cutting spending. So, what I am committed to, and by the way, right now in the U.S. House, there are about 85 members that are committed to balancing the federal budget in 5 years. And so I want you to know it is my intention to join that group of 85. We need to grow up to a group of about 125. 2 years ago, there were only 35 in this group. So we made a lot of progress 2 years ago, but we need to make a lot of progress again today. So if we can get up to around 125, then we can turn the ship around. So that is my intention. But anyway, we have to shrink government spending by about $200 billion a year for 5 years as we encourage the growth of the free enterprise system. How do you do that? In the first place, you stop doing it the way we're doing it now. I don't know how many of you followed the agriculture bill and the discussion over the agriculture bill and so on. A lot of you have. And by the way, it's really the food stamp bill. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. It's 80% food stamp, so let's just be honest about this. You know, I think language counts. It's important. The way that bill is being handled is largely in isolation. It's like it's a world unto itself. You can't do that. Before you consider any spending bill, you have to set a limit on how much you can spend. I have a hunch that Commissioner Schaller does this in Blue Earth County. I have a hunch you don't just spend till it feels good. Right, Doug? I mean, you have to set a limit. You have to set a limit. And so before you consider a spending bill, you have to set a limit, and then you prioritize. And then the next year, your limit has to be lower, and you prioritize. And the next year, I mean, it has to be lower. And I am committed to, after 5 years, this budget is going to balance. And then we have to start paying this debt back. Okay? Pretty obvious, right? Now, what if you don't put a time limit on it? What if you don't put a time limit on it? And I want you to know there are several very big differences between myself and my competition, Mr. Perry. I want you to know what I think is the most important one is he doesn't put a time limit. I do. It has to be 5 years. Why is a time limit important? Well, I'm known as a politician, but a lot of you know I'm really a teacher. Now imagine me giving an assignment to a class saying, I want you to do such and such a project, and this is what you have to do. And if that's all I say, the students are going to ask me, well, when is it due? Right? You're going to ask? You bet. What if I say, well, just hand it in when you get it done? How many papers am I going to get? None. Or imagine the IRS saying, well, you know, April 15th, don't worry. Just whenever you're ready. By the way, that's not a bad idea. Without a time limit, you don't have much. And so that's partly why I am in concrete. You have to have a time limit and you have to have your clear spending limits, and you don't spend a dime until you've got that spending limit in place and you see a way to stay within the limit. Okay, let me just mention a couple things where I think we can easily make reductions, and then you're going to want me to mention more. I'll be happy to do that. But let me just mention a couple. I want you to know that I think corporate welfare is not part of our constitutional system. And when we spend $36 billion bailing out GM, which is currently what we're out, okay, then we are engaged in what I think is a violation of the Constitution, and it's also bad policy. General Motors should have been allowed to declare bankruptcy, as Northwest Airlines did. I mean, Northwest Airlines could have been a model for the nation. Declaring bankruptcy, becoming leaner and meaner and a lot more competitive, right, in the world marketplace. I mean, this is pretty obvious. I want you to know I'm a constitutionalist. When I take an oath to uphold the Constitution, that means something. I believe the Declaration of Independence is unconstitutional. Or excuse me, what did I, boy, I'm glad my opponents have something new to go after. I believe the Department of Education. I'm just trying to think if there's any way that could be a Freudian slip. Don't get me going on that. Anyway, Department of Education, I'm sorry, violates the 10th Amendment. Now, some of the things we spend money on, vocational education, financial aid, there are a lot of ways to do that without having a policy-making department. But I often ask teachers if they, or themselves, or they can find me another teacher who will say, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, Goals 2000 have been helpful to them in the classroom. I assure you, those teachers are difficult to find. I haven't found one yet. There's got to be one there someplace. So there are a lot of things like that. That's just for starters. But I have to mention one more, and then I'm going to open this up to questions. I read in the beloved Mankato Free Press here about 3 weeks ago a story about this federally funded project or experiment taking place north of Grand Rapids. $50 million of our tax money being used essentially to study the effects of climate change on peat bogs in Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly.
Really? They're building greenhouses in the wilderness, okay, in the peat bogs. They're going to heat the peat bogs to find out the effects. What is it? It's part of the green agenda. I mean, obviously the Greens are hoping they're going to find that if you heat the peat bogs, more carbon dioxide comes out, and so we better not heat the peat bogs or we're all going to die from carbon dioxide. I mean, that's the game. We cannot afford to be wasting our money. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, the party's over. And I want you to know, in a few days I'm going to be going to Farm Fest. And I'm going to be speaking there, and I want you to know I'm going to say exactly the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, the party is over. We have to get our house in order. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a financial crisis. I want you to know the Australians think we're going down. Okay? They are planning their economy on the assumption that we are headed for financial collapse. And I hope that all of us here are committed to seeing to it that the Aussies are wrong. So in a nutshell, that's what I see. I'd be happy to respond to any questions. Yes?
You mentioned numbers.
Yes.
I've had one in mind, and I'd like to see how they work together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been hearing for some time from conservative sources that our debt service or cost of borrowing money is about 40% of our budget. You mentioned 20, and you mentioned 36%.
Right. I've got two different numbers. The money spent by the federal government in 2011 consisted of 36% borrowed money. I mean, for that year, 36 cents out of every dollar spent was borrowed. So that's the spending for the year, about $3.5 trillion. We brought in about 2.2 trillion. Okay, we borrowed close to 1.5. So that's one number. Another number is the amount of interest on the national debt in a given year. And that's, right now for 2012, that's going to be about $435 billion, right in that range. And that's at low interest rates. So it's kind of an apples and oranges sort of thing. Go ahead.
The 40% that I hear frequently,
yes.
Is that a number that's rounded up, or is that pretty accurate?
Well, you often hear this number, the 40 cents out of every dollar spent is borrowed. The 36 cents that I quote is the official government from the General Accounting Office. That's their official number. I think that's scary enough. It might be higher. Corey?
I'd just like to point out that the Declaration of Independence technically is unconstitutional.
I think, Corey, you are quick. I stand vindicated. Corey, thank you. Well, that's about the quickest response I've seen in a long time. Yes, sir, in the back.
You mentioned that there were 85 congressmen in Washington now committed to this debt reduction.
Yes.
Are they on a 5-year plan too? Have they set a definite time, or are they kind of indefinite as well?
They're on a 5-year plan. They have a comprehensive budget that will balance the budget in 5 years.
So it's that.
So it's basically the same concept. It is that group that I would join. It's commonly called the Republican Study Committee, although that's kind of loosely defined. It's pretty similar to what's called the Tea Party Caucus. Okay, and again, I want you to know, if elected, I will join the Tea Party Caucus. I mean, this is where I'm coming from. Yeah, go ahead. Is that? Okay. So that's about where we are. But they're committed to balancing the budget in 5 years. Now, I want you to know Congressman Ryan's budget, which I think has a lot of good in it, doesn't balance the budget until out to something like 43? I might be off a year or two on that. But it's farther in the future. Well, it's too far in the future. Now, in all fairness, I think he might be ratcheting that down after the election. But I just want you to know that budget is out there too. Yeah, Corey, go ahead.
Would you be in favor of balancing the budget first year?
I would not. Okay, I want you to know I would not. And the reason that I say that is because we need to have the economy growing to filling in the unemployed people, and otherwise, you know, our tax revenue is going to go down. So I just think realistically, Corey, and you asked what my plans are. I think realistically, I think we have to have something like that 5-year window. But as we take off the shackles of free enterprise, it can expand and create more jobs and fill in the public sector jobs that will be lost. I mean, we're talking about making a transition from public sector employment to private, and it's a transition we have to make. So, and that's the consensus of the Republican Study Committee. Yes, sir?
Is that same switch germane to the Defense Department? Are we going to privatize our military?
Well, I mean, a lot of the contracts are private, but let me say this. This debt is a huge threat to our national security. Okay? I mean, this is a huge threat to our national security, because if we don't have a viable economy, we can't have a viable national security. Now, can we make reductions in defense spending? Yes, we can. We have to. And I frankly think the emphasis has to be on high technology, how to protect our computer system, how to protect our electrical grid, that sort of thing. I think you know that when our drone was forcibly landed in Iran a few months ago, that was done by Chinese scientists who took over the controls of the drone and landed it. I mean, this is warfare in the modern era. This is, I mean, high technology has to be among the highest priorities. Now, let me add too, I want you to know I believe in having a strong national defense. But I also believe that wars for the purpose of nation building violate our Constitution.